Welcome back guys to another Odyssey video, and this time we will break one of the last game mechanics in Assassin's Creed Odyssey which we had not broken yet. And that is the Adrenalin bar. I have finally cracked this open and you will get literally infinite adrenaline by doing all these things mentioned in this video. If you ever wanted to get 5 adrenaline bars for an assassination, 3 adrenaline bars for every arrow kill and 1 adrenaline bar for every melee hit, then this is definitely the right video and the right build for you. But in order to use this build properly and understand how I made it, you also have to understand how adrenaline works and how it is best to generate adrenaline in this game. Because it is not coming from any of your perks in your gear. Having adrenaline on your gear items is actually the worst thing you could ever do in this game, because it will just reduce your damage. You should never put any adrenaline perks in your gear. Just dismantle every item which comes with an adrenaline perk. There is a much better and much easier way to get adrenaline without sacrificing any of your damage. One of the biggest problems for adrenaline is when you use an ability, no matter if you make a headshot or a critical hit with it, you won't get adrenaline for it. So you won't get any adrenaline for your actions which are done with an ability. No matter if you do a lot of headshots, you won't get adrenaline for that. Of course, this is reasonable by game design, because otherwise we would have an infinity loop by using the same ability over and over. However, there are some set bonuses that give you 50% of an adrenaline bar whenever you use an ability, but that will not completely refill your adrenaline, so it is rather useless to use them. And even when you engrave that on better gear, you will only have a 25% of an adrenaline bar, which is so small that it is actually not worth to use. The only exception to that is the Furiosa Bloodline ability, which gives you 4 adrenaline bars to the cost of 1, so the net gain is actually 3 new adrenaline bars. Of course, there's also Shadow Assassin, which gives you 1 additional adrenaline bar for every assassination, and Hunter Mastery, which refills your first adrenaline segment, but those are passive bonuses. No active ability will ever give you adrenaline, except for Furiosa Bloodline. Another important thing a lot of people don't know is when you kill your enemies with a single attack in a melee attack, you don't get adrenaline at all. In fact, you only get adrenaline for melee attacks if you don't kill your enemies, if you only make non-lethal hits. That is actually incredibly dumb and really a big bug in this game, because when you do an assassination you get adrenaline, when you do range hit kills you get a lot of adrenaline, but when you instantly kill an enemy with a melee attack you don't get anything. So keep that in mind when you do your melee attacks, because adrenaline on hit and adrenaline on crit, which are supposed to work for melee hits, are pretty much useless. So what's left to generate a lot of adrenaline are actually 2 things. First of all, we have the plus 600% adrenaline when parry, which also makes you catching fire, so that is not really a good thing, because 1 adrenaline bar is roughly around 200% of adrenaline gain, and in this case the 600% adrenaline is actually only multiplying the adrenaline you get from parrying by a factor of 6, so you won't get 3 adrenaline bars, in fact you will always get less than that. What is actually a lot better than the 600% adrenaline from parry is the 200% adrenaline with fire attacks, because this can be executed with arrows, with melee attacks, with literally everything, even when you do assassinations. It just gives you a ton of adrenaline as long as your fire attacks ability is active. So at the moment when you activate your flaming attacks ability, you will get plus 200% adrenaline added to your adrenaline on headshot, adrenaline on assassination, adrenaline on hit and adrenaline on crit, and you can actually check that in your inventory menu. All this will stack and generate an insane amount of adrenaline together with your existing adrenaline perks from abilities and masteries. And on top of that you can make the duration way longer, because flaming attacks would normally only last around 20 or 25 seconds, but with the flaming attack duration increase you can make it a whole minute of insane adrenaline boost. So you can consider your flaming attacks no longer be a pure fire attack button, but rather consider and use it as an insane adrenaline boost button. The sad thing on this is actually that it doesn't work with normal fire attacks, so if you only engrave permanent fire or use fire arrows it doesn't work, so you really have to use the flaming attacks ability. That is why I recommend you to increase the duration as well, so you don't have to bother activating it every time. For the actual build, I used a modified version of the best tank build from last year because we don't want to use the core for engraving, we want to be as resistant as possible so that we can also enjoy our adrenaline from melee hits. And even with as high resistances as 90% melee resistance, 64% range resistance and 70% elemental resistance, I still got over 840,000 damage with a light attack, over 1.2 million damage with a heavy attack and 3.6 million damage with a charged heavy attack. Ring of Chaos will still easily be over 2 million damage, and Fury of the Bloodline, if you still want to use it, even though it's not necessary to get Adrenalin, will be around 7 million damage, and the Overpower attack will be between 12 and 14 million damage. Of course, our arrow damage is not as weak as it actually looks like. It is still 4.7 million damage for a devastating shot and even up to 5 million damage for a predator shot. That is more than enough to kill every mercenary in Greece, even on Nightmare. If you liked this video so far, you may also consider to become a patron or member to support this channel and help me to create these great contents for you. In our inventory we have 128,000 warrior damage and 227,000 assassin damage. This seems to be very low, but we are playing at full health, we don't use the core for engraving and we also don't use the yumminess. We want to enjoy our adrenaline, our abilities and also be at maximum resistance to get the most out of our melee attacks. Of course we also use the Bighorn bow, that is a mandatory item if you want to play this game seriously because it multiplies your warrior damage by a factor of 1.6 and it also uses your warrior damage when you shoot arrows. So definitely get this when you use your 200 free helix credits. On our left weapon we will use the perfect epic warrior sword with warrior damage, damages swords and critical damage, and we will engrave armor penetration on it. You can actually get one of these perfect epic swords from the A Friend in Need quest in Attica. Just lie to Hator to keep the sword at the end of the quest. For the other epic sword you can of course go for the blacksmith and just do the blacksmith reload. The second sword will have the same stats, warrior damage, critical damage, damages swords, and here we will use the convert 50% assassin damage to all damage. Since we don't use the core for engraving, we can again use the assassin damage conversion. Please be aware that hunter damage conversion is by far the better one when you use the 100% damage minus 100% resistance. So always use hunter conversion with the core for engraving, but if you don't use it, it just comes down to the stats and which damage you have the most. If you want to get 100% melee resistance, then you can of course also replace the second epic sword with the Spartan Javelin with the same engraving. But my recommendation would be to use the build just as shown. Then on our Bighorn bow we will use the plus 200% adrenaline gained with fire attacks. Again, this also works with fire arrows, it also works with your assassinations, which is totally crazy because it gives you 200% adrenaline just as long as your fire attacks are active. No matter with what kind of attack you do it, you will also get it for every assassination. However, a big problem might be that this engraving can only be unlocked from the Ixion's Agony, which is a Tartarus weapon which was just added together with the Corfu DLC. On our helmet we will go for warrior damage, 20% crit chance while full health, 30% range resistance, and then we can engrave 30% damages swords. Of course you can also get these engravings in a different order, it just matters that you get the same ones. For our bracers we will use the Stone Isu bracers, which is a unique item. You can get this item from the third episode in the Atlantis DLC when you do the story mission for the Fort of Meneseas, which is one of the very last story missions. The Stone Isu bracers have assassin damage, critical chance and critical chance at full health, so that is the only item in the game which has 30% crit chance at full health, and we will engrave another 30% melee resistance on it. On the belt we have warrior damage, melee resistance, 100% crit damage while full health, and here we engrave the flaming attack's duration increase because that is the best spot which doesn't block any resistance engravings. This engraving can be unlocked when you complete your free Ostracars from the Corfu DLC. On the breastplate we have warrior damage, 50% critical damage, 20% elemental resistance, and here we engrave another 15% all resistances. And on the boots we have warrior damage, 100% crit damage while full health, 20% crit chance while full health, and we engrave another 20% elemental resistance. The proposed version of this tank build will have 246% warrior damage, we have 84% assassin damage and 125% hunter damage. We have 120% damage swords, 100% crit chance and 525% critical damage, which is very high considering all the resistances we have. We have 60% fire damage, 90% melee resistance, 64% range resistance and 70% elemental resistance. And of course, when you have activated your flaming attacks ability, you will have all the crazy adrenaline bonuses with over 200, almost up to 300% adrenaline on headshot, on assassinations, on critical or normal hits. For the perks and abilities, we will actually use the same ones as in the God mode build from 2021. And we will start here again with Sixth Sense, allowing you to double your hunter damage, but also to slow down time for better assassinations and reaction time. Put 2 points on Arrow Master to unlock fire and poison arrows, and then it's basically up to you which of these abilities you want to use, either multi-shot, devastating shot with the 400% or predator shot with the 600% damage. However, definitely mandatory is to get Archery Master for the additional headshot damage and also because it refills your first adrenaline segment. Then you can use 1 point here as a bridge to get your ghost arrows because overpower bow strike doesn't work with the bighorn bow. Gets a charged heavy attack, it deals actually 300% damage, so not the 150% as stated, it's in reality 300% damage. Get Gear Master, Weapons Master for the additional passive bonuses. Then since we have a permanent fire damage engraving, you only have to put 1 point here on the flaming attacks to unlock the fire mastery, which gives you 40% additional fire damage. So definitely get those because that's where your 60% fire damage is actually coming from. Then get overpower attacks if you can, and if you even have the Atlantis DLC, you could care about getting Ares Madness, but if not, then you can also save those 3 points. Similar to Ares Madness, Furious Bloodline is also a DLC ability from Legacy of the First Blade. It's really powerful, but if you don't have it, just save your points, go for Ring of Chaos Second Wind instead. Then Shadow Assassin is really useful, because it also gives you 50% additional critical damage, so no matter what build you have, go for Shadow Assassin, then Rush Assassin, Critical Assassin of course. The critical assassination might actually not be enough to assassinate a mercenary on daylight, so you either have to assassinate them overnight, use your warrior abilities, or play with the Falx engraving, which gives you a little bit more damage. Then don't forget Stealth Master. Stealth Master increases your out of combat damage by 10% overnight, which is a flat 10% bonus. It's a real multiplayer, so it's really worth to get if you play a lot during nighttime. In the low point version for around 200 points, you should put 12 points on the crit chance and also 12 points on critical damage. Then another 12 points on range resistance. You will have slightly less range resistance, but don't invest those other 8 points for just 3 points in resistance. That's not worth it. Rather put them here on warrior damage and then further down on fire damage and armor penetration, and also put a couple of points here on health dealt restored as health, because that is basically replacing your healing ability. In the Assassin tab, only go for more Assassin damage, because we will also convert that Assassin damage to be 8% melee damage. Then definitely go for damage swords as much as you can, and max out the crit chance at full health, crit damage while full health, put a couple of points on damage while full health, and of course don't forget the elemental resistance. However, if you have way more than 200 points, let's say over 400 or 500 points, then you should max out crit chance, crit damage, headshot damage, put a couple of points on the other abilities, max out your range resistance, put a couple of points here on adrenaline on headshot kill, chance not to consume special arrows, a little bit on your hunter abilities if you really want to go for them, max out warrior damage, max out your health, your armor, fire resistance, armor penetration, and also max out the health refill if you want to, and a little bit can be spent on all abilities. Don't forget damage whenever time is slowed down, that's really good for Sixth Sense, Assassin damage, damage swords, all the crit stuff, elemental resistance, a little bit here on the adrenaline cannot hurt. And if you still have points, then you can boost your health refilling a bit by putting points on health gain per adrenaline spent, damage on elites and bosses, maybe even cooldown reduction and damage for your assassin abilities. And those damage boosts to single abilities are usually not so strong, they are only stackable on your base damage, so definitely avoid those until you have way too much points. So I hope you like this video, please don't forget to subscribe, leave me a like, and see you next time.